say they unafraid.
Those who spread and cheer, a chasm among their brethren dear. Can you not see the beam in thine own eye before casting judgment from on high? In God we trust, let this be our creed, to build bridges not walls, to plant love seed. For in the embrace of unity, we find the strength to coexist, you see. Instead of seeking peace, you summon strife. You revel in chaos, you crave the fight. But there is but one race, the human race, and in unity's light lies our true might. In God we trust, let this be our creed, to build bridges not walls, to plant love seed. For in the embrace of unity, we find the strength to coexist, you see. You see. Let us lay down our arms, our words of war, and seek the path of peace once more. For every soul a brother, a sister. In the grand tapestry of life, we are all but one. You serve the schemes of those who profit from discord, from turmoil, from endless pain. But united we stand, divided we fall. In unity we shatter the chain. In God we trust, let this be our creed, to build bridges not walls, to plant love seed. For in the embrace of unity, we find the strength to coexist, you see. You see. Guardian angels watch from above, guiding us with the wings of love. They whisper peace into our hearts and show us how to mend the parts. In God we trust, let this be our creed, to build bridges not walls, to plant love seed. For in the embrace of unity, we find the strength to coexist, you see. You see. Together let us heal the wounds of a world torn by needless feuds. For in the light of love's embrace, we find our true and sacred place. love's embrace, we find our true and sacred place. In God we trust, let this be our creed, to build bridges, not walls, to plant love seed. For in the embrace of unity, we find the strength to coexist, you see. You see.
Welcome everyone to the Tori Sess Show, and today we're on YouTube. We are back. They found, I sent a cheeky post to all of you saying, hey, I need to get to 100,000 followers. Who wants to follow me? And the reason I did that was just to kind of, in a fun way, say I'm back. So we have a lot to talk about. And today, obviously, a lot of people are talking about this bus, and we still have a lot of rift going on in regards to Israel and the Palestinian thing. So I wanted to break that down for you guys today and actually discuss these things, because unfortunately, we live in an era where the influence operations that are happening are just so insane from all aspects. And you know, the loser in all of this, in what President Trump actually achieved, was the old guard, the crown, actually. So we've often heard the word peace so often that it actually feels worn out, right? It's something spoken in conference halls while the world outside kind of like, oh, what's going to happen? But peace isn't a slogan, and it's not the absence of sound. It's the presence of actually understanding. And it requires clarity, honesty, and citizens who refuse to repeat headlines like parrots, but who think, question, and know why they believe what they believe. So for generations, outside power spoke for the people of the region of Palestine, Israel, just the Middle East in general. They drew lines on maps, promised one thing to the one people and another to their neighbors, and called the result order. That's basically the crux of it. And I apologize for the coughing. As I've said, I'm at the tail end of some cooties that my niece so nicely brought back home to give me as a gift. So I apologize if I'm whipping out tissues and coughing. Now, I want you guys to understand that it was never peace. What was there? There was managed tension. And the time for that old colonial diplomacy is way over. And we're not here to perform history. We, the people, and what President Trump did was rewrite it together. And I go back to many years ago when I posted a picture of President Trump on all my social media, including my Instagram, where he was sitting in Winston Churchill's chair. And I put writing there that says, history will be kind to me because I intend to write it. And yesterday, that is exactly what took place. Well, yesterday, the day before yesterday, a week ago, it's been happening. But the actual aftermath of what he has done is now sinking in. And unfortunately, we have a lot of people that are pro-Israel upset that there's a Palestine. And then we have the Palestinians saying, like, what the heck? But people, you need to understand that most of these people that speak are either ill-informed, don't understand what just happened, or simply played by the crown and the globalist institutions to perpetuate this apartheid, this segregation between people. And, you know, and I expressed to you at the time when President Trump was in England and sat on that chair is going to be monumental. That chair and him sitting there is him telling you and telling the crown, I'm about to write it. And what you're going to learn today is a little bit of core history to understand what's going on there and what is a Zionist. Like, is it like old colonial Zionism, or what does that really mean, right? So I found a couple videos online that I'm going to play for you guys at some point. But it's important for us to kind of just recap what has happened. So the piece, or this piece that we see that's coming upon, there are a lot of narratives happening right now that it's false peace, that it's this, it's that. But actually, it's one that was forged in daylight. It wasn't behind velvet curtains. And it's different because it actually began with transparency. Every nation that sat at this table, at the table, to actually solve this is proud, it's sovereign, and they felt heard. There were no hidden clauses, no secret channels, no lectures from afar. Each government spoke in their own voice and signed in their own hand. So that honesty is our first act of trust. To have these conversations, to see what is it that the people of those regions actually want. Now, the reason that I'm bringing this up is because the rhetoric has not stopped. While many people that are rabidly against Palestinians even existing and calling them all terrorists, you have to think, are they just misinformed, ill-informed, or is this by design? Because the facts say it's most likely by design, not by actual, I would say, knowledge. So I thought it would be important for us to discuss what President Trump has achieved, obviously, through what Jared Kushner had put through. And this is where I circle back to many, many years ago when Jared Kushner actually took a presidential advisory position during President Trump's first term. And there was a lot of pushback. And, you know, when I pushed back and repeated parroting rhetoric, I saw that I was in. And what I realized quickly was that this was an MI6 operation because of where the noise was coming from. And we're talking back in the days. And so I observed a little bit in order to be able to understand where all of this was coming from. Because, okay, you know, they have all these conspiracy theories. I mean, right now, I think Grace Ministries was going by how this is a fake, you know, thing. And all these people are talking prophecies. And, oh, maybe Jared Kushner's the Antichrist. But I want to give you some actual facts and some knowledge. One thing that I enjoyed when President Trump actually decided to take on the task that he declined earlier, you know, a few years back. We're talking before he ran, right? Excuse me, opening up my drink. Was that he was a businessman and saw things. No, I'm not reading. Why would you say I'm reading? I'm actually smart and I can speak on my own things. So what we saw was that he takes a business approach, right, to everything. It has to be, all the parties have to agree. There's got to be something they want and something that can be provided and something that can be amicable and everybody wins, right? And right now what President Trump did was actually make a lot of, put forward a lot of moves for winning. So we're going to break down how he did it. But I want to tell you, this piece was built on respect for identity. So no one's going to ask someone to erase who they are, right? Usually we just ask them to stand really tall with their story and extend a hand across the border or across the table, knowing that dignity is not a limited resource. Israelis have the right to security and flourishing in the areas that they built. Palestinians also have a right to a future that's their own, not borrowed or brokered. And our Arab partners have the right to like progress, unchain from the conflicts of their great grandparents. Like every nation deserves to walk upright, not as a client, not as a proxy, but as a neighbor. Okay, this is how you make peace. You respect people. You don't demand things. And we'll get to that because it was demands and colonialism and imperial colonialism, basically, that caused the rift in the first place. And that's from the birth of the Zionist manifestos. Now, to all citizens that are listening within the United States and outside of the United States, I want you to understand that this agreement is not a page in someone else's history book. It's our daily lives that are waiting to be kind of shaped. None of you are spectators. The work of peace can't be done with diplomats. That was always the problem. It's going to be done by engineers building new roads, teachers, linking new classrooms, entrepreneurs trading across borders, and parents daring to believe that their children will inherit something better than endless suspicion and endless wars and hate, right? And so at this point, from watching all of the news and everything that was being spewed, like Hamas is acting up, if people only understood what a spit in the face it was to succeed this deal from England that was excluded, mind you, from this. Okay, none of the Europeans or any of them had really anything to do with this. This was President Trump and the region, leaders to leaders, negotiating and expressing, I would like this. It could be something simple, like I want every kid in my country to have a pony. Okay, they said what they wanted. They said what they felt was necessary to help their country. We want, a good economy. We want to be able to stand on our own. We want to have more power over the decisions we make in our country. We want, whatever it is that they want, right? So there was a lot of listening and a lot of negotiating to get this deal. Now, a lot of people say, well, this is stupid. It doesn't even say that Palestine's a state. Actually, the way Gaza is and the way Palestine is right now, they're not capable of becoming a self-sustainable state at the moment. They're not capable because they don't have infrastructure. They don't have homes. I mean, they've been flattened out. The only people that are upset are the way right-wing Zionists and the neocons that have a problem with this because there's no capture. And we'll get to the source of why this was ever done in the first place. And then, if you understand what happened in the late 1800s and early 1900s, maybe then you'll understand iPod's documentaries better. Because for years, I have been talking about how we split the Korean continent, right? There were two young lieutenants that were like, yeah, let's just draw a line here. And it's like, no Koreans were at the table. It was during that period of time that England, the United States, and Russia decided that they're just going to draw borders wherever the fuck they want. And they don't even have to ask the countries a question. And this is how the idea of an Israeli state came to be. And that's what we're going to be examining today so that people understand just what a great accomplishment this was. Because when you actually read the news and read beyond the noise, you should ask yourself who benefits from all this like kerfuffle and confusion? Who profits from despair? And who fears an informed public that cannot be manipulated? See, our administration, President Trump's administration, does not fear informed citizens. He actually depends on them. Because the Democratic Republic can't breathe through parrots and repeating talking points. He needs thinkers, people who can hold two truths at once, who can look at a complicated world and still choose cooperation over cynicism. Now, the measure of this peace deal will not be the ink on the paper. It'll be the transparency of its progress. We'll be able to see the contracts, the projects, the exchanges. You'll be able to see the mistakes too. Because only open eyes can correct them. And no one's going to hide behind the process, but we're actually going to govern in general by results. So, from me tonight to every citizen from Jerusalem to Abu Dhabi, from Amman to Washington, the era of spectatorship is over. The future actually belongs to participants, those who build, who question and understand. So all of us need to be moving forward, not as echo chambers of old empires and grudges, but as free nations with open hearts and clear eyes. Because peace is never imposed. It's actually constructed brick by brick, truth by truth, together as one. That is how you create a good foundation, for the future. And so President Trump during his speech said a few things. The one, and I'm going to point out two. One, he gave Jared Kushner a ton of credit. He said none of this would have happened without him. And that's true. He was constantly pushed back by, your typical, feds. And I hate saying that because not all of them are bad. And we've coined it like that. Let's just say the usurpers of this nation, the fourth unelected branch of government, was extremely upset. His goal, from a business perspective, was to find a way to make peace. Now, many times on my shows, I've discussed China's extremely tactful and very sexy approach to how they conquer nations and infiltrate them. They go there offering them money, but not free money. They say, here's what I'm going to have to do. I would like to build you bridges. And I will build the bridges for you. And in exchange, that energy that the oil you're pumping right there, I'd like some of that. And when the oil percentages that you provide me pay off the money that I invested into making these roads, then you no longer owe me money. Kind of like that. Hey, it's almost like the IMF, but better, right? Because with the IMF, there's a lot of people in there and they just keep you in this cycle of debt. With China, there is no defaulting. You default, I take. So this is how China has entered into the dark continent of Africa and has developed it, of course, right? Because it was left underdeveloped by the Western nations purposely. So China found the opportunity to get in. And right now, the region that President Trump found a way to bring peace was extremely necessary for the future. Like, when I was kind of examining on how I wanted to talk about it, I wanted to, kind of sit back for a little bit, not, jump into it. I wanted to see and let percolate and obviously observe the responses from people. Is anyone going to mention Samuel Huntington? Is anyone going to mention neocons and British and U.S. intelligence and how Obama facilitated this and how, we've had the Crown kind of use the World Bank and the IMF to stymie things, right? Now, this deal that President Trump did is the deal of the century, I would say, in this era. And it's as business framework, not as a peace process. So the way President Trump approached this Israeli-Palestinian conflict is the way he would a complex real estate dispute, not moral or political crisis, right? None of those. He looked at it as a real estate deal. How many times have I said, hey, we shouldn't be killing people over real estate deals? Now, from the start, right, there was a rejection of the traditional framework of final status negotiations or two-state solutions rhetoric that every administration since, even before Clinton, but Clinton was where the fuck up happened, kept, parroting. What President Trump did instead is he framed the entire problem as a stalled business project. Two sides with lands, grievances, potential, and what they lacked. And then the the instability they're causing to other businesses in the area. Now, in this view, was the leverage and the liquidity for him to actually move forward and bring it through. Now, Jared Kushner obviously is a very successful businessman himself. And while many may say, oh, he has businesses there, and he has businesses there, and he had interest because he has businesses in Israel. I didn't hear any motherfucker say that shit when Bush went in there and bombed the shit out of Beirut. Like, stop. Okay? Business is how he handled this. And this is why it is such a genius approach. So the mindset produced the Abraham Accords, right, in 2020, which were less about Israel and Palestine reconciliation, but more about rewiring the regional economy. And I've said this because we have the Belt Road Initiative from China, and, Beijing is not ceasing. Beijing's like, I'll just wait. I'm sure this is going to fuck up somehow. I'll just pause right here and wait. Now, the Abraham Accords basically encouraged Arab states to normalize with Israel, meaning they started to create corridors of trade, energy, and defense cooperation. Hey, I'll give you some software. You give me some software. Let's exchange some planes. Let's talk about drones. Hey, how about you take my apples? I'll take your oranges. And I'm really dumbing it down so that people actually understand what the core concept of the Abraham Accords were. And then it was indirectly pressuring Palestinian leadership. This is an ask from the Arab nations, Qatar, United Emirates, right? Saudi Arabia. You need to start pressuring the Palestinian leadership by shifting the regional incentives, right? Because we have a big problem there. So obviously President Trump's point man was Jared Kushner. And, he actually described it in purely developmental terms when he talked about it. He said it's an investment portfolio for peace. The peace to prosperity. That was the plan. It wasn't a political map. It wasn't a $50 billion infrastructure proposal designed to attract private investment with an implicit message. If you can't agree politically, at least you can profit together. That was key. So in short, our president abandoned the moral arbitration in these eons-long war, and it's not eons; it's actually from the 1800s. So I'll revert to that because we have a lot of misinformation going around. But he reframed the diplomacy as deal making, giving each party in those agreements tools to grow, and not asking them to forgive or reconcile. And that'll come in the future. So that's the real big problem here, is that the approaches that we're taking, we want solutions. And at the end of the day, when you're talking about countries that have so much hate, the Palestinians, rightfully so. The Israelis, well, the ones that went to Israel were actually with the idea that they can segregate with the Palestinians when they were offered that land by the British. And it was actually the British colonialists that brought them in, and they encouraged the apartheid, which, they were supposed to coexist together. They were supposed to be working together. But then the Israelis, were bolstered by the British to say, yeah, Palestinians can't live on our farms. Get the fuck out. And it's like, but we were just doing fine, working together. Like, what's your problem? And the British started to intervene and interject and demand that those rules be upheld. And they even the British killed Palestinians and Israelis that didn't want to play along with the apartheid and the separation. That was a big deal. That was a very big deal. So just so that people understand, this isn't the final solution, though, but it's forward in momentum. That's how it began. President Trump recognized that there would be no final solution in the conventional sense, right? He openly said both sides were stuck in ancient hatreds. He said that so many times. And the U.S. could only help them make the best of what they got. So this pretty much is mirroring the way he sees the whole world, whether trade, NATO, or the Middle East, right? He's always talking, hey, NATO, we're paying you all this money. This is business. You're not paying your bills. What's up? Why are we paying? Right? But stability through transaction replaces any long-term political settlement. So rather than bury the hatchet, the goal was, come on, let's just build around it and we'll figure it out. Now, this is why a lot of people were like, "Oh, it's gonna fail. Hamas is gonna act up." Don't trust that, because here's the thing: the reason Hamas agreed, right? Even though in their eyes they're right, and a lot of you will probably agree after watching some real history, it's not the way forward. That ship has sailed a long time ago, and you can't do it. I mean, think about it. Back in the early 1900s, the actual Israel Jews, they weren't even Israeli. There was no Israel. They were just Jews from England, came with British, colonialists, and they were all fine. And then suddenly they were like, no, we're buying this. The rich Jews came in. They bought a lot of land. I found a video that actually puts this, so I sliced it up so we could watch it together. It was the only one that was non-biased and gave full clear-cut facts. It's from a channel called Great War on YouTube. Fantastic channel. And it was the only one that I could find that didn't have a bias. Some people, whatever video they did was pro-Palestinian or pro-Israeli. It's like, can we just talk facts and truth for a hot minute? Can we not, muddy the waters with expletives and, fake shit, okay? Because it's fake. Now, what President Trump achieved technically is not peace, it's functional coexistence, He even said it. You're never going to love each other, but you can both make money, secure your borders, and modernize your economies. Pretty much. And in geopolitical reality, that's often more durable than any paper treaties. Because then, you have to understand why these paper treaties failed. And that was because of the Crown's intervention into it and them not wanting it to happen. And not only that, the IMF and the World Bank helped tank any agreements that were made. It was like created in order to fail. Now, you have to understand that is kind of playing off what China's strategy is, which I would like to coin as infrastructure strategy, because through the Belt Road Initiative, they operate in the same freaking logic. Well, the underlying logic is there. Enter a fractured or underdeveloped region, avoid taking moral side, offer infrastructure loans and technology as neutral leverage, build dependence and mutual economic benefit rather than trust. So now these interdependencies that China has created with all these nations, right, is why they're so successful in obtaining more, I want to say allies, but it's not real. They're not real allies. But I guess relationships, more solid relationships. So China, in effect, when they enter these underdeveloped regions or fractured regions, just like they entered Burkina Faso after the US and France were kicked out, it doesn't solve local conflicts. It actually overlays them with economic interdependence. And President Trump's strategy toward Israel and its neighbors kind of was along the same lines. And, turn regional politics into, I guess, how would I say it? Interlocking business ecosystems, ports, pipelines, corridors, digital trade, rebuilding cities, where pragmatic interests suppress ideological wars. So you can think of it as westernized mercantile realism, meeting in Eastern strategic patience, right? The difference is that China sustains this through long-term state planning, while President Trump pursued it through short-term transactional gains and branding leverage. Now, just to recap, these thoughts, Trump's Israel approach was not political in the classic sense. It was commercial diplomacy, statecraft through deal flow, right? He understood that no final solution was achievable. So he focused on parallel reconstruction, helping each side gain resilience and prosperity. And, like I said, that ethos actually matches China's business as peace, right, model that they've done. And because President Trump knows that strategy really well, they were unable to penetrate Venezuela, and he got them kicked out, and they ran off, with their tail between their legs. unable to, recover. So I guess it's very understandable for people to wonder why decades of diplomatic and economic peace efforts in the Middle East have failed, right? And why powerful Western institutions often appear to benefit from all of these failures, or at least tolerate the instability. And I'll give you the short answer. It isn't really that the IMF or Britain want turmoil, but the systems through which they exercise influence are built to preserve leverage, not equilibrium. So, thinking back, you know, why most of these peace, plans had repeatedly failed is because most peace frameworks like the Oslo and Camp David roadmap and even the deal of the century depend on two things: global finance controls, funding, and conditionality. Now, when the IMF or the World Bank step up in loans or reconstruction packages, they attach structural conditions: currency reforms, privatization, fiscal discipline, and debt service. So they're like, okay, we're going to give you these loans, but here's what's going to happen, okay? Instead of having Palestinian money or Israeli money, you're going to have pounds because it works for us. And not only that, you're going to allow these big corporations that we say to come and enter and build. And then you're not allowed to spend unless we see where you're spending every penny as a nation. And we're offering you a debt service. So while you're trying to pay off your loan, we'll just add a few more loans to tie you over and then just own your ass, kind of like the way the crown was able to capture all the European nations through that same incentive. And this is what has been happening for years. And it's a problem that they created too. Now, Britain's posture, right? Since the mandates that they've always put has never worked, right? And has never been outright considered colonial rule, but it was considered a strategic custodianship. They would keep the region open, divided, and negotiable. The fragmented neighbors require external mediation, and London still sits at the junction of finance, insurance, and intelligence that services those mediations. So, if there was stability, that would allow regional blocs to trade directly, right? Oil to Mediterranean ports, Gulf capital to Levant technology without Western intermediaries. That's not okay. Controlled instability guarantees that you're still relevant and you're sitting at the table. Shipping lanes stay patrolled by the Royal Navy allies. Energy trades in sterling, clear dollars. And diplomatic expertise flows through the British think tank networks. Do you see why they never wanted peace in the Middle East? Why they kept perpetuating this? And these are the same people that manufactured Zionism. Oh, wait. Because you're going to find out that the term Zionism, right, was actually birthed in England. And this was their covenant in the early 1900s, where they planned and told them, we're going to, give you some land. And then, after they said this, they went in there, occupying Palestine, and then bringing all these Jewish people and saying, okay, here's your land. Go do what you want. And the Palestinians are like, wait, hold on a second. Wait. Like, who are these? Who are you? And why are you here? And why are you bringing these people? Oh, yeah, they should return to the homeland. It's theirs. Look at this paper that was written. We said so. How about that? And this is early 1900s. This isn't after Hitler. See, because the whole Hitler thing was crafted and used in such a way that it justified why they should have a region when it's all muddied up. So we're not even going to touch World War II. We're only talking World War I right now, okay? Because that is what needs to be discussed, right? And I don't want to hear people talking about religion. I don't want people saying, read the scriptures and look at what they say. You need to learn discernment. All of you have to. You have to be able to discern what's fact or fiction and what's radicalization. Now, radicalization comes in many forms. You know, it's it's like a woman that's hurt. My heart's been torn out. I hate men. Kind of like that lady from the movie Monster, right? Where she was so pissed that she was raped that she just killed all these men. She pretended to be a prostitute and was just killing them all because she was so mad. And so a lot of people get mad when, you know, they start waving the Bible, and then you ask them, what version is that? Can you tell me what version, which version of the Bible are you talking about? No, I see. The one written in 1900, 1800. No, it's Jesus's words. Well, Jesus didn't document his words. The apostles did. But those have been dismissed. So what version are you talking about? Then the cognitive dissonance sits in. So we're not even going to talk religion. How about that? Because a lot of people lose their mind. Jesus said Israel is going to stop. Israel then didn't really exist. And Israel was not about a country. It was about a person. Okay? It was about a person. And when someone sit there and say, well, the Hebrew Bible, and you trust that too, because man wrote that too. And when you see just how intricate and how opt the whole world was during World War I with what happened, then you're going to start to understand why this solution was the only way forward. Because number one, none of y'all motherfuckers were there, were you? I was there. You're not David Hogg. You did not travel to the past, okay? And that's it, okay? You can't go back in time. You weren't fucking there. So don't tell me, oh no, this happened. How'd you know? I read it in a book. I could write a book and say whatever the fuck I want. Does that mean that happened? No. Comey wrote a book of how loyal he was and how he has a higher loyalty. Tell me, was that truth? Fuck no. So again, please stop utilizing scriptures that you don't know who wrote. But one thing I will tell you, as a very devout Christian, the underlying tone of love was never erased. So keep that in mind. The undertone of love and the actual message was never erased. I mean, if you're going to edit something, you got to make it believable. So you're just going to skew a few sides. You know, all these Bible thumpers, no one asks, well, that book was removed because the Pope said so. And the Pope is blasphemy himself. He says he's God's representative. What the fuck? Is he not on the same Bible? Just saying. So, we're going to leave religion out of it. We're going to talk facts, business, money, and orchestration. Because this is exactly what happened. And give me a second. Let me just see if this video uploaded. Let me see. Yeah, it's up. Okay, it uploaded. Yeah, I see it. Okay. I really wanted to put this video, but I can't right now. So, give me a second, because I really want to get this this in for you guys. And I don't want to miss it. But in the meantime, and the reason I'm playing this video again of President Trump is this is going to come into play very soon. So let's just take a short intermission and listen to what he says and listen to the poem that he reads carefully. He's read it a few times, and soon you'll understand why. Again.
Who has heard the poem called The Snake? So I have it. Does anybody want to hear it again? You sure? Are you sure? Okay. So let's dedicate this to General Kelly, the Border Patrol, and the ICE agents for doing such an incredible job. Right? This was written by Al Wilson a long time ago. And I thought of it having to do with our borders and people coming in. And we know what we're going to have. We're going to have problems. We have to very, very carefully vet. We have to be smart. We have to be vigilant. So here it is, the snake. It's called the snake. On her way to work one morning, down the path along the lake, a tender-hearted woman saw a poor, half-frozen snake. His pretty-colored skin had been all frosted with the dew. "Poor thing," she cried, "I'll take you in, and I'll take care of you." The border. "Take me in, O tender woman. Take me in, for heaven's sake. Take me in, O tender woman," sighed the vicious snake. She wrapped him up all cozy in a comforter of silk and laid him by her fireside with some honey and some milk. She hurried home from work that night, and as soon as she arrived, she found that pretty snake she'd taken in had been revived. "Take me in, O tender woman. Take me in, for heaven's sake. Take me in, O tender woman," sighed that vicious snake. She clutched him to her bosom. "You're so beautiful," she cried. "But if I hadn't brought you in by now, oh heavens, you would have died." She stroked his pretty skin again and kissed him and held him tight. But instead of saying thank you, that snake gave her a vicious bite. "Take me in, O tender woman. Take me in, for heaven's sake. Take me in, O tender woman," sighed the vicious snake. "I have saved you," cried the woman, "and you've bitten me, heavens, why? You know your bite is poisonous, and now I'm going to die." "Oh, shut up, silly woman," said the reptile with a grin. "You knew damn well I was a snake before you took me in." Who has heard the poem?
Sorry, that kind of looped because I'm trying to get this video that I compiled up on the system so that I could share it. So this actual poem speaks volumes. You know, I'm watching people just say things like, you know, "Trump is BB's bitch." It's like, do you guys forget how he was in the square and everyone was booing BB? Israelis were booing BB and praising President Trump. People need to use a little bit more discernment and stop outsourcing their thoughts and their ability to think and process information. I mean, to do something fucking wild, okay? Do wild shit. Like, think for yourself. Like, listen to all the sides and then make a decision. Now, this snake, there's a lot going on that one, but you'll see it coming through. Now, going back to this deal, you know, you have to understand that any time a peace deal was done for that region, institutions like the IMF and the World Bank, and in the U.S. orbit, like USAID, they were actually designed, like most of them, after 1945 to actually integrate developing economies. Everything happened after World War II. So basically, you know, they would integrate these developing economies into a single rules-based system. And their mandate was financial stability. But the tool was conditional liquidity. Conditional. Meaning conflict or reconstruction both require loans. Peace that produces self-sufficiency does not. Right? And so a low-grade crisis economy, rebuilding, rearming, refinancing, keeps this global capital circulating through the same Western banks that underwrite these funds. So it isn't a conspiracy for chaos. It's the inertia of a system where volatility actually yields dividends and dependency ensures payment. You know, in America, we call that the military-industrial complex. This is the governing by economy complex. Now, Britain, Washington, and Bretton Woods institutions don't like the term colonialist globalist. They prefer a little bit of turbulence, right, about hegemony maintenance. And every time a region stabilizes on its own terms, alternative financing like China's Belt Road Initiative or Gulf, right, the Arabian Gulf sovereign funds are the ones that gain traction. So they don't want that happening. So as long as the Middle East remained divided, Western financial architecture remained indispensable as a broker. And that's why any new entrants like Beijing, Moscow, and even regional development banks, they frame their offers as infrastructure for peace because they're selling exit ramps from the dependency cycle. You know, I spoke of this in length back a long time ago, you know, how Greece had taken all these like handouts in the 90s. In the late 90s, then they lost their currency and then they had all these loans and they defaulted because they're in this dependency cycle of default. And this is how, you know, these big globalist institutions make their money by keeping people in perpetual debt and countries. So just so you understand, permanent tension is not an explicit objective, right? It's a byproduct of a leverage economy, right? Peace reduces, you know, transactional needs and dependency sustains it. They wouldn't need the banks if there was peace. So they need dependency in order to sustain it. And now the older colonial powers learned that a region in flux is easier to insure, finance, and police than a region in full control of its own trade and credit. You know, they don't want these people having independent currencies. They don't want these people being independent. They don't want these people having a say in shit. They're better. They know better. Look at us. Like, we're a Western nation. And we have a gross domestic... Oh, stop. Like, we're so smart. Like, you guys are still swinging off trees. Like, let us help you. So, in order for you guys to understand this better, I am going to get this video for you. And we're going to start it. And I really hope you guys take in what is actually being said here. Because it's important to understand history in its sense on its own without any side notes or people, you know, I don't know, alleging that they have knowledge and that they know better. To be fair, our president knows better. So let's get this video started and see how well our president actually did, because he did really well. Here we go.
Hi, I'm Jesse Alexander, and welcome to the Great War. The peace settlements after 1918 had divided up the former Ottoman territories in the Middle East into British and French mandates. Britain took control of mandatory Palestine, but the territory would prove very difficult to govern. One of the flashpoints was Zionist Jewish settlement of the Holy Land, a controversial topic today and back in 1921. So in this episode, we'll take a look at the practical implications of Jewish settlement in Palestine after 1918 and the violence that resulted. Jewish thinkers like Theodor Herzl began to theorize about a Jewish national home where Jews could live in peace and security. This was the origin of the modern Zionist movement, which at first considered numerous places around the world for a possible Jewish homeland before Ottoman Palestine became the most popular option. In 1896, Herzl published The Jewish State, an attempt at a modern solution to the Jewish question, in which he envisioned a sovereign Jewish state formed by migration in Palestine or possibly Argentina. Not all Jews supported Zionism, but it gained influence quickly. Jews had lived in Palestine from ancient times, and 19th century European Jews had been migrating before Zionism, but it wasn't a national movement. Most migrants were elderly Jews who wanted to live out their final years in the holy cities. But by the eve of the First World War, many younger Jews who identified as Zionists began to arrive. Some of them brought socialist ideas from Europe and formed communal settlements known as kibbutz. Although exact numbers are disputed, around 40,000 Jews arrived between 1909 and 1918, which nearly doubled the Jewish population to 85,000. Jews represented about 10% of the population, while the other 90% was mostly Arab Muslims and Christians. Some Zionists weren't worried about the Arab majority. In fact, in 1909, Zionist activist David Ben-Gurion thought that Arabs would benefit as well. The Jewish settlement is not designed to undermine the position of the Arab community. On the contrary, it will salvage it from its economic misery, lift it from its social decline, and rescue it from physical and moral degeneration.
I'm pausing it for a second because I want you guys to understand what he just said. So when they wrote this manifesto of what Zionism is and the idea of getting back to the belly button of, the earth, because the region of the Mediterranean is considered the belly button of the earth in regards to trade and resources. This was created in the late 1800s in England by people that were in England. And so they wrote this manifesto saying that, we will, go there and we're going to save the Arabs because they're just so swinging from trees, and it's our job to be their nannies and come in there and take over. But this was done through Britain. Remember, this was actually ushered by the British government. It wasn't done by Israelis just mass moving, because unfortunately, a lot of people have the idea that the Jews all went there after World War II. That's not true, because the issues started before that, way before that. And Churchill, Stalin, and Roosevelt helped make it happen. And think. They helped make it happen. So let's continue.
A renaissance in Palestine will come through the country's regeneration, that is, the renaissance of its Arab inhabitants. Many Arabs felt otherwise, like the editors of the Philistine newspaper in 1914. We are a nation threatened with disappearance by the Zionist tide in this Palestinian land, a nation which is threatened in its very being with expulsion from its homeland. So by 1914, 19th century European nationalism and anti-Semitism had caused some Jews to seek a new homeland in Arab-majority Palestine. The outbreak of the First World War stopped Jewish migration for a few years, but British wartime promises set the stage for more conflict. From 1914 to 1918, people in Palestine suffered from wartime shortages, and the region became a battlefield in the last 2 years of the war. It also became a focus of international politics thanks to the Balfour Declaration of November 1917. British Foreign Minister Arthur Balfour.
Okay, before we get to that, I wanted to say something. How many times does our president tell us that most of these issues are from that time period? How many times has he stated that that was the period of time that we have had issues? So now you're saying, wait, 1917, there was a declaration? Oh, yeah. This was another one of those things. I have mentioned before that borders in those areas were never actually created. It was just like rich families, sheikhs, that owned property, and they kind of it was like their village, their home. So they were responsible in taking care of everybody and everything, right? So at that point, World War I sparked. And then you have to ask yourself, why did World War I happen? This is how infrastructure gets implemented. So the first thing that happened was they forced all these nations like Egypt, Jordan, and everyone after World War I to actually draw borders, right? They needed borders because actually, the Arab states actually ran to put borders together because it's like, holy fuck, the British are here. They're going to take everything. They're going to take everything. They've just come in and they're taking over because they're helping us. Because this is a region of interest. Key thing. Oh, and key thing. I'm going to leave it at that. Let's continue. So that way you can hear about this Balfour Declaration.
Sent a one-sentence telegram to the Zionist Federation of Great Britain that would have a lasting impact. His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country.
Right? What he did, in other words, is, so we've decided as England that this treaty says that we're going to put Jews there. So wherever they are in Europe, we're going to collect them and we're going to put them there. And, by no means are we going to cause any issues to the Arabs that actually live there. We're just going to bring them in, and they're going to enjoy the benefits that they've had in every other country, like their own. But there won't be any hassle, no fights, said the British.
The Zionist movement appeared to have gained Britain's support, but although some British ministers were sympathetic, the declaration was about wartime strategy. Many Britons believed Jews were influential in the United States and in revolutionary Russia, and hoped that the declaration might help the war effort against Germany. British anti-Semites also supported the declaration in the hopes it might reduce the Jewish presence in Britain. Some prominent British Jews, like Chaim Weizmann, helped bring about the declaration as well. Weizmann was an important chemist for British war production, and he convinced Balfour, Prime Minister David Lloyd George, and Winston Churchill of the Zionist cause. The British government, however, had also made other promises for Palestine. They discussed a pan-Arab state with the Hashemite dynasty.
Hold on a second. So someone put out something that has been circulating a lot, and you're going to see that it's not. And the comment says the League of Nations in 1920s stole the Palestinian land that was under British control under the Mandate for Palestine since World War I, when the Ottoman Empire fell, and gave it to the Jewish people that were displaced in World War II. Now, here's where you're going to see that's a lie. They didn't give it to them in World War II. They started bringing them in the 1920s under their colonial rule, where they entered into Palestine and created British control, colonialism. This is why Burkina Faso's first course of action was to get rid of the French, which had, imposed themselves into. They've done it to Lebanon, they've done it to Algeria, the French, I'm saying, Syria, and Burkina Faso, etc. These monarchies superimpose themselves into other nations. I mean, we have the Danes that took over South Africa, right? They all kind of distributed the African nation under their own guise. And so the British came in and took one of the most wealthiest regions, which were, the area of Jordan, Egypt, Palestine, and what we call Israel today. So that nation was actually manufactured and given status after World War II, because they used the excuse of all of these displacements that they had because of Hitler, that now they deserve it. And it's like, bitch, you're lying. You started this shit before, and wait till you see what they were doing, because these are real facts. There's a difference between old school Zionism, bad Zionism, bad, because it's a British fucking op. Zionism is literally a British op. It's not real. They manufactured it in books with Jewish people that were there, and they started to create this idea in the late 1800s and did it. And that's the problem. We have a lot of muddied stories. Yes, the Jewish faith, right? Because none of them are really Israeli by blood of that region, unless they're Palestinian, Egyptian, Jordanian, right? They're not. They're from somewhere else that just subscribe to the Jewish faith now. Except for the Ashkenazi Jews, which are fascinating to study from a biological perspective, because these people have bottlenecked so hard that they have diseases that only they can get. But it's people need to sit back and understand that, yeah, while people of Jewish faith have the right to be in that region, just like Christians do and Muslims, right? That doesn't mean it's their land, right? Because grab me an Israeli right now that came from Russia or Poland, and I'll tell you how they're more Russian and Polish than anything. They have no bloodline that traces back there. So it's really important for us to kind of bring things into perspective and understand all the muddying of the waters, the use of religion in order to hijack people's minds. Israel in the Bible was about a person, not about a land. You should go do your homework on that. I'm not going to sit here and explain it for you. I'm telling it to you because that's actual fact from biblical scholars. No matter how many times it's been edited, the essence of the Bible can never be ejected from its scriptures. So here we are at a point where these globalist leaders to take over the world, remember, because during that time, they were also eyeing Asia, and, 30 years, 20 years down the line, they split up the Korean peninsula. They went down to South Africa. They started to do shit in Australia. They started to they fucked around and found out with Russia. So Russia was in on it because they owned a lot of land, right? So that was their, power. They already knew that the energy market was going to be a key thing. Black gold, man. That's what it is. It's black gold. So they needed to get in there before that was identified as a necessity. Because if you look back in history, when did we start having cars? Oh, in the early 1900s. When did they start getting juiced up to go into the Middle East? Oh, when they got cars and they needed fucking gas. And airplanes and they needed fucking gas. And big ships and they needed fucking gas. Are you paying attention? So this is all about conquering, all about conquering, not about helping. All about conquering, not about helping. So let's continue.
And post-war League of Nations mandates with the French. The British tried to untie this Gordian knot at the Paris Peace Conference in 1919. Weizmann met with Hashemite heir Faisal, and both issued statements supporting the Balfour Declaration. Faisal had this to say: "We Arabs, especially the educated among us, look with the deepest sympathy on the Zionist movement. Our deputation here in Paris is fully acquainted with the proposals submitted yesterday by the Zionist organization to the Peace Conference, and we regard them as moderate and proper. We will do our best, insofar as we are concerned, to help them through. We will wish the Jews a most hearty welcome home." It seemed that Zionists and Arabs might both get what the British had promised them, but things changed quickly. Once the peace conference came to an end, British support for a pan-Arab state disappeared, and they took control of Palestine via the League of Nations. A US commission found that the vast majority of Palestinian Arabs opposed Zionist settlement, but the British authorities began to act on the declaration anyway. Jewish migration and settlement in Mandatory Palestine resumed and expanded under the British regime. 35,000 Jews arrived between 1919 and 1923, mostly farmers from Eastern Europe. In 1920, the British reopened the old Ottoman land registry, which once again allowed land to be purchased. Jewish settlers bought large tracts of land, often helped by international organizations like the Jewish National Fund, the Palestinian Colonization Association, and the World Zionist Organization.
Did you hear that? The Palestinian Colonization Organization, the Jewish Fund, the Zionist Fund. So they got all this money to throw at them. And we're talking early 1900s. They were paying something crazy like $700,000. Oh, pounds for shit. And buying land off of other Arabs. This was not what the British had sold to the Arabs of a pan-Arabian handle, right? This is why all the Arabs went up in arms. They were like, what the fuck? No, I'm drawing my borders here. This is not happening. We are not playing this game. This is our land. Why are you coming here? And they're like, stop us. Look at us with our weapons. And this is what happened. So when people sit there and they tell you, oh, the Jews only went because Hitler took their home. And no, that's fake. This is real history. And now when you see this real history, you're just like, I'm mad for the Palestinians. They got fucking screwed by the smarter people, the people that had technology, the people that knew a little bit more, and they knew just how important their region is. And that, or was to be. And that's the biggest problem here. That, President Trump had to create peace in a region that shouldn't have happened the way it happened, right? Then you have the people like Bibi, and Bibi was the one that didn't want the Abraham Accords. Bibi was the one that was putting his foot down for everything because he wants what the Brits had promised them from the get-go. So he was mad. And he was like, yep, this is not happening. We're taking all of it because it was promised to us. But with the same note, they promised a lot of shit to the Palestinians.
Throughout the 1920s, Jewish financial inflows were on average 40% higher than Palestine's actual domestic product. But this land did not come cheap. In Ottoman times, local peasant farmers often didn't register the land in their own names because they were afraid of extra taxes or military service. Wealthier city residents registered the land in their name in exchange for tools or animals for the peasants. Now the landowners in Damascus or Beirut sold their holdings to Jewish settlers for exorbitant prices. Much of the land bought by settlers.
Hold on, you guys, I just want to tell you something. So it turns out that there is, the entire United States internet is down. YouTube, X, AT&T, T-Mobile, Google, Reddit, Spectrum, Xfinity, and the list goes on. There's some sort of cyber attack. Cloudflare and AWS simultaneously. Someone cut some undersea lines or something. Just breaking it down. So just in case you find difficulty in observing, you could go check that out. There's something going on with the internet right now nationwide. So I apologize. It's not my feed. It's actually the internet going down. Okay, so let's continue. I apologize for the interruption. I just wanted to let you guys know because I know a lot of people are constantly posting, hey, it froze. Oh, I refreshed. I had to sign out and sign back in. So I wanted to kind of just clarify that. So let's continue.
Was sparsely populated and undesirable swamps or marshland. Often didn't register the land in their own names because they were afraid of extra taxes or military service. Wealthier city residents registered the land in their name in exchange for tools or animals for the peasants. Now the landowners in Damascus or Beirut sold their holdings to Jewish settlers for exorbitant prices. Much of the land bought by settlers was sparsely populated and undesirable swamps or marshland. In September 1921, for example, settlers acquired around 72,000 square kilometers of the Yisrael Valley from the Lebanese Sursuk family for £726,000. Within months, numerous settlements were founded and the swamp was turned into fertile farmland. Other areas settled by Jews were also inhabited by Arab families, some of whom had been there for centuries. The socialist Zionists brought with them the ideology of Hebrew labor, in which only Jewish farmers could tend the land of Jewish settlements. Since hiring Arab labor constituted a forbidden hierarchical relationship, Zionists introduced a system of segregation in which Arab farmers were dispossessed and evicted. Although some received compensation, those who refused were often ejected by British forces at the request of the settlers. Even pro-Zionist Britons in the Mandatory government realized that such actions would lead to conflict, like the legal official who made this observation. The settlements created a policy of economic apartheid, which was bound to strengthen the resistance of Arabs to Jewish immigration.
So in other words, they manufactured conflict, right? By the British saying, yeah, you can kick them out, like whatever, they're beneath you. You go do your thing, boo-boo. This is what happened. And the officer there said, hey, they're segregating. They're treating them like slaves. They're kicking them out. You know, this is a big problem. And they pointed it out, like, what's going on? And wait till you see what happened next. Well, and wait till you see who funds the Islamic studies and who actually helped fund the Muslim Brotherhood. Now we're getting to it.
So the British mandatory government in Palestine was in theory objective, but in practice it supported Jewish migration and passed laws which made it harder for Arabs to expand the lands that they owned. But not all British leaders were in favor of cooperating with Zionist organizations.
So you heard that, right? So what they did was the British brought in all these Jewish migrants from Eastern Europe, which is Russia. Stalin did that, right? Don't forget, right? And so they bring them there, and then they're like, hey, the rich ones bought some land, the other ones just were given land. And then the Arabs were not allowed to develop their land. They weren't allowed to build houses. They weren't allowed to farm. They weren't allowed to do anything. Anything. And they caused the issues. And so people were like, wait, hold on a second. This is not okay. This is not what we agreed on. You know, they're supposed to be living together. We promised both sides that it's going to be peaceful. But now we're leaning to the one side. This is real history. This is why you see some Israelis and, you know, American Jews running out saying, we're going to make it a parking lot. It's ours. And yeah, we're going to kill them all. And it's like, this is a crown monarch driven up from the early 1900s that was created to create disruption in the region, to create this dependency cycle. Now, I want people to understand this, because out of all of these things that happened, while some people were like, oh my God, Trump's such a... We just fucked the crown, right? Completely. They had no say whatsoever. The World Bank is pissed. The IMF should shut its doors down, because the only clients they've got are in Europe. And when they wake up with a little bit of Trump conversation and talk about deal making, suddenly there will be nations like President Trump's first UN speech who said, you should be very proud of your nation. You should always stand for the people of your nation. You shouldn't be just complying with these globalist policies. Remember that? Cooperation brings a lot more. But this also, strategically, I'm just saying, us actually being in the region was imperative, because China's got a huge foothold in the region. And unfortunately, the Arabs can't sustain it. There's too much, you know, British/US counterpart created jihadism that never existed. That shit never really existed. It was manufactured. That's the point.
Groups like the Zionist Commission had been working with the British since the beginning of the mandate, while Weizmann promoted their cause in London. But they couldn't convince all British leaders to support them. Chief Administrator in Palestine, General Louis Bowles, complained to Lloyd George about Zionist activities in March 1920. My own authority, and that of every department of my administration, is claimed or impinged upon by the Zionist Commission. It is of no use saying to the Muslim and Christian elements of the population that our declaration as to the maintenance of the status quo on our entry into Jerusalem has been observed. Facts witness otherwise. On the other hand, the Zionist Commission accuses me and my officers of being anti-Zionism.
So, whenever you call out someone that is Israeli, the state of Israel, committing crimes against humanity and not being very, I would say, 2025. I mean, back then people used to behead, but the shit they're doing. What are you called? Oh, you're called an anti-Semite. See, before it was called anti-Zionist. So if you were to criticize that the Christians and the Muslims in the region were being pushed the fuck out, and they were being slaughtered, and they were having their land literally stolen by these people that the Brits brought in from Eastern Europe, right? You're suddenly an anti-Zionist when you call it out and say, dude, we can't be doing this. We're actually helping them do this. No. And this is why they created World War II afterwards. I mean, it was a hot mess because people were like, I'm not for this. So you need to understand the difference between the people of Israel and Bibi, who's this kind of old colonial imperialistic Zionist. You know, being a Zionist means that you feel that Israel is a nation, even though it was a person, it's a nation. So that people that have one religion are owed a nation, basically, is what's being said, because this is our homeland. But if you genetically trace them, none of them are from there. Facts. I think China got all that, didn't they? And when they put out that report, people are going to be so mad. But again, all right, shit happened. We're not going to go backwards. We're going to move forwards. And that's exactly what President Trump did. He said, we can't go back and fix this. We got to move forward. Because either way, history is muddled. You question anything someone says, you're an anti-Zionist, just like these officers were, or what they call now anti-Semitic. This is why European nations, colonialists like France and Britain, have laws saying you can't question the Holocaust. How dare you? You're going to jail. Why did they say that? Because they created that. As they created the friction in the region for their own benefits. Because like I explained, actually creating cooperative agreements like what President Trump did, excluding those Western nations. None of them sat at the table. It was all the Arab nations of that region, and they said, let's talk. What are we talking about today? Tell me, Saudi Arabia, your country's running out of oil. You've got about 10 years of pumping oil. How can I help? What is it that you need aside from stability? Hey, Oman, talk to me. Hey, Jordan, talk to me. Hey, Egypt, talk to me. Hey, Palestinians, talk to me. We just want our land. We've been living here like generations and they've blown it up. Yeah, but Hamas, of course Hamas, because that helped. By creating that, it helped. And you'll see more on that. Let's go.
The situation is intolerable. It is manifestly impossible to please partisans who officially claim nothing more than a national home, but in reality will be satisfied with nothing less than a Jewish state, and all that politically implies. Eventually, Bowles called for the Balfour Declaration to be revoked, but his military administration was replaced by a civilian one led.
Did you guys hear that? He said the Balfour Declaration is out of control, guys. We're causing severe issues. There's segregation, there's slavery, there's death, there's capture. This is not okay. It needs to be canceled. And they canceled him. They were like, hey, General, nice knowing you. But we're going to put a private military company because you're a fucking bitch. And so we're going to hire private people to go and finish the dirty work that we started. And they're going to kill all these people. And they're going to separate them because we said so. Because your integrity is getting in the way of our operation. Pay attention. This is real history.
By High Commissioner Sir Herbert Samuel in July 1920. Samuel was a British Jew and an enthusiastic Zionist. Writer Musa Kazim al-Husseini was part of a delegation that met with colonial minister Winston Churchill in August 1921. Since Palestine opened its doors to Jewish settlers, its trade has gradually drifted into their hands. They depreciate the value of land and property, and at the same time manipulate a financial crisis in order that landlords under the stress of need should sell out at ruinous prices. Can Europe then expect the Arabs to live and work with such a neighbor? Had not England better find a country for them in the vast, uninhabited regions of her great empire?
Holy shit, that's the sauce right there. So what they did was when they went in there and the really rich Jews, they bought like this land, the other ones just settled. They're like, yeah, oh, we're squatting. The Brits brought us. And they're like, you can't sit here. This is my dad's land. Well, yeah, Britain, come here. Take him out. Kill him. Because he's not letting me sit here. And then the British soldiers are like, well, I don't know, man. This doesn't seem right. And then the British government said, you better fucking support those Jewish settlers right now. Kill them. And so when they couldn't kill because people were watching, right, what they were doing is they would take all the trade, right, and they would be the traders. They would, the land that they already confiscated, they would block roads. Wait, and now you're going to see how the Iron Dome / Iron Wall came to be before World War fucking II. Because the unfortunate facts that lay before us is that people outsource their thinking to other people. They do not read anymore. We need to make America read again. Because if you actually knew the history, you would understand the immense task that President Trump took on to fix this. Because right now, as you're seeing, this is what the globalists want. This is what the monarchies want. The ones that have all the vast empires. And like he said, why didn't you find another place of your vast empire to put them in? Why'd you bring them to our house? And they're taking everything we have. So now, for all those out there that are blindly pro-Israel, think about it for a second. What have you been supporting? You've been supporting colonialism in this era and justifying genocide because you were promised what from the Brits? And they had nothing to do with you. You guys, the Jewish population, was actually just a tool for them to get in there. They utilized their bitterness, their nomadic tribes, because they were nomads always. Jewish people were always nomads throughout the beginning of time. Okay? They were nomads, they were everywhere. So then you have to question, like, hold on a second. They were nomads. They write this manifesto in 1887. They've got big money Jews down in America. We're going to pool our money. They created the banking systems. Everyone liked that. Everyone loved it. So then they were like, okay, here's the manifesto of Zionism. They're like, all right, so now we're going to bring Jewish settlers and plop them there because that's where you want to be. Because you guys are good with money. You'll be able to exploit the property for us more. So go, slaves. So they treated the Jews like pawns. So no matter how much people can say, oh, I hate Jews. Don't say that. That's not okay. That's not okay. Because it's not their fault, just like it's not yours. Well, it is, because you could read. But that they've just been given this history and never fact check it when there's actually documentation. Actually documentation. So here's the real history of how this whole, obviously, eons long. No. They were always nomads. They never had a land. They were servants to the Roman Empire, right? Because Jews were slaves to the Romans, period. Why? Because they were smart and they were banking and blah, 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 blah. And they had the Romans as their protection. You remember how when Pilate was like, here's Barabbas, the really bad criminal, and here's your king of the Jews. Which one do you want to kill? And they were like, kill him. Ideologies suck. Let that murderer go and slaughter him. Crucify him. And the Romans did as their subjects requested. Because it seems that the Israelis themselves are not independent either. Think about it for a second. They're not. And what President Trump just did is like, all right, the Palestinians are fucked. They've got zero economy. They've got some propped up shit. Their land is decimated. This is not okay. The Arabs will not agree by moving the Palestinians like they suggested to Cyprus. Oh, that would have been a whole other can of worms. And so, because that was actually on the table. You won't hear about it, but I'm telling you it was on the table. Okay? So they were going to migrate all the Palestinians to Cyprus. And that would have just opened the 1974 occupation by Turkey into Cyprus. But again, Cyprus is actually a colony of the Great British land. Think. So, as you can see, for the past 20 years, the monarchs have been losing footing, and their stories are beginning to crumble because people are starting to realize where the source of the issues are coming. Those that think that they are above the people, those that are still living in the archaic ages, those that still believe that you're going to plant the crucifix and slaughter everyone on that behalf. And that's, just symbolism of how they used to do it, how we annihilated millions of civilizations. I would say millions of different civilizations throughout time by yielding a religion as a weapon. And this is exactly what's being done. Because, when you sit back and think about it, this is why it makes me sick when I hear Bibi or any, like Dinesh, talking about the Bible and this. And it's like, or that weird woman with the crazy lip fillers that was like, the Jews never crucified Jesus. We didn't kill him. And an American didn't kill Abraham Lincoln. The fuck they did. Yes, they did. Okay, yes, they did. You're not going to change history because you fancy it. You can obfuscate history, right? But you can't do it for the truth surfaces at the end. And not only this, the British annihilated all the Christians and the Muslims in the area that were living there just fine. But they needed to come there and take the resources. The French, the British, the Spanish, right? These big nations that were so smart and better than everyone else needed to come in and take over because they're all Neanderthals. They need us. That's how it went.
Churchill reiterated that Zionism should also benefit the Arabs, but he made it clear that British policy would not change. The British government means to carry out the Balfour Declaration. I have told you so again and again. I told you so at Jerusalem. I told you so at the House of Commons the other day. I tell you so now. We intend to bring more Jews in. We do not intend you to be allowed to stop more from coming in.
Huh. And this is 1921. Wait a minute. No. This is with World War One, manufactured World War One, of course. Does anybody know why we started World War One? Anybody? I'll wait for it in the chat. I want to see if anybody knows why World War One happened. The sauce of it was to actually take over lands, and push their globalist infrastructure, kind of how the Paris Accords were written in the 1800s, 1700s, but it's something new, isn't it? So think about it. Churchill said, fuck that. We're going to bring all the Jews there. Tough noogies. And it's like, hold on. So tell me again how this is appropriate and correct. Tell me again how this is, a good thing. I'll tell you how it was a good thing for Britain, the United States back then. Well, Russia got fucked. They should have known better. But do you know why it was a good idea? Because the more division they have in that area, the more control they have. And the more control they have, it's like that list that I've been playing, that video of that list. Here's a list of the nations that we're going to topple. So we could just take all their shit. How about that? World War I was the primer for World War II. The full takeover.
Palestinian political opposition to Zionism failed to stop Jewish migration for different reasons. The British refused to accredit Arab congresses, the Palestinians were divided on whether they wanted a Palestinian or pan-Arab state and along tribal lines, and the British mandatory government gradually removed pro-Arab administrators.
Thank you. So now, the British, even though they had an agreement with the areas there, said, yeah, fuck them. We don't give a shit about the Arabs. We're going to send them all the Jews. And they're like, wait a minute. We had an agreement. Like, we were going to kind of like work together on this. Yeah, no, we've taken over your country. Like, no, that's not how it works. We say what goes. Tough shit. And remember, this is 1920. This isn't World War II. This isn't Holocaust. This is before that. So now someone needs to tell me, how is it that the Jewish people were in a disadvantage when you could see that the British refused to acknowledge the Arabs and the Christians? And the British also said anyone that was pro-Arab or gave anything like talking about genocide and removing these Arabs was removed. We're just going to stick more Zionists. More Jews are going to sit on the panel. How about that? And then we all are of the fact that they were disadvantaged. And then we have the radicals that are like, oh yeah, Hitler knew what he was doing. No. Hitler wasn't even real, honey. Wait. Because you're going to find everything out. The Crown was not even part of these conversations that President Trump had. And that was done for a reason. They were excluded. They look like fucking chumps. Like chumps. Like complete chumps. Complete chumps. They weren't even part of this conversation. Because the Crown, it's crumbled. And this is, I go back to that posture that I did. Like, is Meghan Merkel, did she get in there to, like, help that shit along? Thoughts. Let's continue.
So Palestinian Arabs were unhappy with British support for Zionism and the lack of Arab representation. The tensions soon turned violent, and riots broke out in February and May 1920. But events in May 1921 overshadowed all previous incidents. Like the British and the Arab Palestinians, Zionist Jewish settlers were also divided amongst themselves. Relations were especially bad between two socialist parties. The mostly Russian Jewish Socialist Workers' Party wanted a Soviet Palestine, an idea opposed by the much larger Labour Unity Party. On May 1st, 1921, demonstrators from the two parties collided in a mixed Arab-Jewish quarter of the town of Jaffa. Scuffles broke out around the Hassan Bek Mosque, which brought concerned Muslim Arabs into the streets as well. Not only were most of the Arabs opposed to Jewish migration, but also to the anti-religious teachings of Bolshevism, and police struggled to keep the three groups apart. A shot was fired, probably by a British officer trying to disperse the crowd, and the riot turned deadly. Groups of Arabs, including some policemen, targeted Jewish homes and families in the neighborhood, killing and looting as they went. A British officer who was on holiday and witnessed the scene reflected on the dilemma for British troops on the ground. When we found it was a question between the Jews and the Arabs, we did not think it was for us to interfere. Which were we to stop? British reinforcements arrived and ended the riots within a week. By then, 47 Jews and 48 Arabs had been killed.
48 were killed. So what happened there? So the story is that, in this area, Jewish people, settlers that had come in with the British, squatted on ancient family lands that had been in the people's possessions for thousands of years. And they not only took their land, but actually raped the women, the daughters. So they fought. And so everyone was like, this is just really fucked up. And the British people were the one that killed the father that was getting vengeance for his daughters getting raped and his land being taken. And so the British soldiers actually shot the Arabs that were like, this is fucked up. They're like, they could take it. How about that? And so one soldier that was like, he's like, I don't know. Like, what do we do? This is like between them. And we're kind of like helping the Jewish people do this shit. And it's wrong. Obviously, he was removed, of course, right?
Most of the Jews had been killed by Arabs, and most of the Arabs killed by British forces. The Jaffa riots shocked the Jewish community and British authorities, and revealed just how fragile mandatory Palestine had become. Some international Jewish newspapers, like the London Jewish Chronicle, criticized the British for holding the inquiry in the first place. Imagine the wild animals in a zoological garden springing out of their cages and killing a number of spectators, and a commission appointed to inquire into the causes of the disaster, reporting first and foremost that the animals were discontented with and hostile to the visitors who'd come to see them. As if it were not the first business of the keepers to keep, to know the habits and disposition of the animals, and to be sure that the cages were secure.
What in the fuck? Did you guys hear that? This is what they said. They said, you brought us there so that we could take over, and you didn't realize that they would fight back. You should have fucking neutered the bitches so we could just take over the land. I'm translating for you. Right? And protected us. So tell me again. Like, while you're listening to this, you'd be like, yo, it's like, let's pretend the Canadians came down. Now, say someone took over America and they were like, listen, you guys are like Neanderthals. We're from the moon. We're like super smart. So, the Uyghurs that are kind of like, ousted from the Chinese government and hunted down for organs and shit. So we're going to bring them here to America and we're just going to give them, I don't know, Kansas. They can have Kansas. So we're just going to give them Kansas because, they had roots in Kansas, the Uyghurs. And, they have like a statue there. They have their wall. Like, their history is there. So let the Uyghurs come and pray there and live there with you. And so they come to Kansas and then they don't have a house. They have like some land that was open, that was purchased by rich Uyghurs. And the Uyghurs sit there and they build this house, and then they're like, oh shit, there's a lot of us now. Okay, let's go take so-and-so's. Let's take Betsy's house from across the street. And Betsy's like, the fuck you are? I paid this bitch. I got a mortgage and everything. They're like, yeah, try me. And then the Canadians come and say, Betsy, you got to give your house. Why? Well, because they're your guests and they're here. And so get the fuck out. And then the Canadians start shooting Americans, saying, whoop, we brought the Uyghurs because they deserve to be here. How dare you? This is exactly what happened in the early 1900s when the Jewish settlers were moved to that area. So how would you feel if that shit happened? Yeah, you would have beef. You'd be like, fuck that bitch. Like, you guys don't have a place here. I want all of Kansas back. But see, here's the problem. You can't undo 100 years of bullshit because then you're just perpetuating an issue. So we got to pick. Do we just blow both of you up so you could shut the fuck up? Or do we just move on? And that's basically it. Let's move on. Let's forget what happened. Not forget, park that bitch. Okay? Let's not repeat the same shit. And we're not going to be doing this again. As a world, we agree we're not going to be bringing settlers because they said so. How's that? Like, pretty simple. This is how you provide solutions. So, you know, when people sit there and I see them, I'm pro-Israel, it's like, dude, bitch, just shut up. Like, fuck you. You should be pro-America. And right now, our interest as a nation is to have peace in that region. Because we're up against bigger enemies, some that, you know, you can't even fathom yet. So it's very important that we have peace in the region. Okay? We do. Because how would you feel if the Canadians were like, yeah, you all are going to live together. Don't worry. Here's the Balfour Treaty. And don't worry, people of America and Kansas. We're going to take care of you. We're going to make sure that all of you live together. And it's going to be fine. And then slowly it's like, yeah, fuck that. And then when the people that are doing this agreement for the Canadians, the Canadian people are like, yo, this is like really one-sided. Like, you know, the people of Kansas are getting fucked. And they're like, oh, really? Oh, okay, you're fired. Let's bring a Uyghur in your spot. And we don't care what the Kansas people say. And then when they take most of Kansas, they're like, yeah, you know, we also want Missouri. We want Utah. We want New York. And we're going to bomb the shit out of everyone. How about that? So, again, these are people that are no longer alive. Okay? So we can't get vengeance on people that are no longer alive. Because don't forget, our country helped in that too. Okay? So what we need to do is move forward and find some common ground. We can't just, you know, you don't need to pick a fucking side. You need to say, holy shit, that was really fucked up. This is never going to happen again. We are not going to superimpose people. We are going to move forward. Because if we don't move forward, and we have a problem. But see, the bigger problem right now is that there are a lot of people acting up in the past couple months because they're a little bit mad. And then you're going to be like, oh, it's the Hamas, it's this. No. It's the global banks, honey. And they're funding the shit out of these people. And those people will wear whatever fucking sign. You want Al-Qaeda, they'll put Al-Qaeda. You want Hamas, they'll wear a Hamas sign. You want them to be, you know, ISIS sign. Highest bidder, man. The World Bank has everything to lose. The European Union, everything to lose. And don't forget, the Crown still has a lot of property. I say President Trump, let's just fucking take it. How about that? Let's just reduce it down. Don't forget, Australia is their colony. Remember, Australia used to be their prison. They used to dump the shittiest fucking people on that land. And they tendered it with, you know, let them. They're savages. Fuck them. And then they decided, oh, we can exploit that shit. Let's use Australia now. You know, and if I'm Australian, I'd be pissed. I'd be like, get the fuck out, England. We're an independent fucking country. That's a whole continent. We got kangaroos. Get out of here. We got dingoes. Get out of here. We don't need you. Thanks for everything you've done for us so far. But for now, we'd like to move forward as a nation. Remember what I just told you. So let's keep going.
The riots caused Samuel to temporarily suspend immigration and make some conciliatory gestures towards the Arabs, which appalled his fellow Zionists like David Ada. The word traitor crossed my lips. Jewish settlers feared more Arab attacks and worried that the British might abandon them, so some groups began to stockpile weapons. Back in London, Lloyd George, Churchill and Balfour met with Weizmann in July and assured him the Balfour Declaration would remain in place. When Weizmann alluded to Jewish gun running, Churchill responded, "We don't mind it, but don't speak of it." British support for Zionism.
We don't mind it, but don't say it that we're okay with them fucking hoarding weapons, the Israelis, the Jews, because they're not really Israeli. We created Israel, so at that time they were just Jews, right? So the people that were Jewish were getting weapons, and he's like, "Shh, it's okay. Let's not talk about it. Don't acknowledge that." Oh, thank you for the coffee. Thank you. So the Jews were just like, yeah, that's happening. So we're gonna collect weapons, and Churchill's like, "Shh." Do you see how conflict is made? Do you know there is a history saying that the Americans and the Israelis funded it is actually the Zionist colonialism, the imperialist neocons of our former governments that perpetuated it. Let's keep going.
In Palestine and the Jaffa riots in 1921 were signs of things to come. In 1922, Churchill wrote that the British did not intend to make Palestine, quote, "as Jewish as England is English," and that Jewish migration would be limited to the, quote, "economic absorptive capacity of the land."
Now, I want you guys to pay attention to this, because this is where they took a hiatus and regrouped. And then we got World War II. Okay? They got craftier. Because the world was like, "What the fuck are you doing, England?" The Arab nations were like, "What the fuck? We all need to get weapons. We need to fuck them up. Fuck the crown." And so they were like, hold on. We're in this region. We're supposed to be helping them. Let's back up. We're not going to send any more Jews. Don't worry about it. We're going to just shh. It's fine. It's fine. Only if the capacity allows. No more. Calm down. Right? This is what they said. Calm down. No more. We're just going to take a pause. Because we need to regroup and figure out how we're going to fucking finish what we started, said the imperialist Zionists.
For Arabs, these vague promises were cold comfort. 1922 also saw the official start of the British Mandate in Palestine, the wording of which included the Balfour Declaration verbatim and granted Zionist organizations quasi-governmental responsibilities. British protection had helped the Zionist movement achieve a degree of international legitimacy, but Palestine was becoming unstable and violent. Haganah founder Ze'ev Jabotinsky felt that the time had come to build a metaphorical wall around the settlers. Zionist colonization can proceed and develop only under the protection of a power that is independent of the native population, behind an iron wall, which the native population cannot breach.
So we're going to stop right there for a hot minute. So what did you just hear? Oh, well, we're just going to create a wall. So the native population, acknowledging that they were not native to that area, can't breach it. We're going to segregate like fucking crazy, and everyone can go pound sand. That's basically what they said. Pound sand, bitches. Because we don't care what you have to say. You're going to pound sand. You're not getting anything. And we have decided that we're going to take over your land. So you can't do shit about it. So stop moaning about it. And we're taking it. Kind of like the, what's being said now. And back then, it wasn't called anti-Semitism. It was called anti-Zionist. Right? And the funny thing is that they were just puppets. They were just cocky. Well, they did have a lot of money, so they had a lot of leverage, right? But they were just pawns, really. They weren't that important to them. They just wanted to get foot in the Middle East, almost like the way our previous administrations from Bush and onwards, right? Bush 1. And obviously, Bush 1 was a 3-term president because he kind of rendered our Ronald Reagan ineffective after taking a shot at him. You shut up, bitch. We got this. Let the big boys handle all the conflict. And we entered the Middle East in another way because unfortunately the Crown didn't want to play nice with America either. So America was like, you know what, Crown? All right, bitch. I see you and I raise you. And I'm going to get into the Middle East and we're either going to play together or I'm just going to knock you out. So where are we in 2025? The British have been knocked the fuck out. Okay? And they have been exposed for what they've done. So you're going to be like, no, they haven't. Look at the rhetoric online. Wait a minute. Sometimes we don't even have to say things. Unfortunately, people don't read anymore. And unfortunately, that is one of the biggest problems that we have, is that people do not read anymore, do not educate themselves. They outsource it. But here's where the kicker is. It's been happening for a while, right under your nose. Let's go to the next segment now.
Hi, I'm Jesse Alexander. In the Arabs and 21, these vague promises were cold comfort. Cannot breach.
Another news has emerged that the Prince of Wales's charitable fund accepted a donation reported to be £1 million from family members of Osama bin Laden in 2013. News of the seven-figure donation was first reported in the Sunday Times, but Clarence House has denied that Prince Charles was personally involved. Well, joining me now is our correspondent, Sadia Chowdhury. And Sadia, Clarence House denying that Prince Charles was personally involved, but the reality is questions and eyebrows will be raised about judgment and whether his charity should be associated with bin Laden's family.
Yeah, it is that, isn't it? It's the name bin Laden, which for many people will automatically take it back to Osama bin Laden. But I have to start by saying that this has nothing to do with Osama bin Laden. The bin Laden family in Saudi Arabia is actually very well known. It's well known for having businesses in the construction industry. It's a very wealthy family. It also has several political ties to members of the royal family there. But there will be questions, as you say, about Prince Charles's association, and this coming from reports in the Sunday Times today that Prince Charles had a private meeting with Bakr bin Laden, the man who deposited that money into the fund. That this meeting took place in 2013 at Clarence House. That Prince Charles agreed to the donation despite objections from his advisors and the fund. These are all reports from the Sunday Times, and they say that even after the payment was made, some of Prince Charles's advisors expressed what they think was a payment that was not going to be in anyone's best interest, and that they had pleaded with him to return the money. Now, we've had responses from Clarence House and the charity. I'll read out to you what those responses are. They're very similar. The first one from the Prince of Wales Charitable Fund, which says the donation from Sheikh Bakr bin Laden in 2013 was carefully considered by PWCF trustees at the time. Due diligence was conducted with information sought from a wide range of sources, including government. The decision to accept the donation was taken wholly by the trustees. Any attempt to suggest otherwise is misleading and inaccurate. And a very similar response from Clarence House now. This one says, the Prince of Wales's charitable fund has assured us that thorough due diligence was undertaken in accepting this donation. The decision to accept was taken by the charity's trustees alone, and any attempt to characterise it otherwise is false.
All right, so now let's talk a little bit about Prince Charles, right, and this donation. So that has just come to surface a couple months ago. And you have to think, why is he getting this donation? Why is Prince Charles getting money from them? Why is he getting money from the Osama bin Laden people, which are also a very big family, but we also know that they work with the previous CIA personas. So you have to think about it in the sense of what service would this accomplish, right? In the sense of, okay, Tori, I get it. So what are you trying to say? What was this money for? Well, see, the Muslim Brotherhood, right? And you know how people say UK funds Hamas and the US does. Now, just so you know, the Muslim Brotherhood was actually founded in Egypt in 1928. Right after they did the pause of bringing the Jewish settlers. By a man named Hassan al-Banna, right? And he was a grassroots Islamist reform and anti-colonial movement guy. And people will be like, well, he's anti-colonial, so he's not British. He is an actual British creation. See, There are well-documented cases where UK intelligence actually cooperated and courted and leveraged Islamist figures for state aims. The most famous ones are the 1953 Iran coup, where MI6 worked with Islamist networks to overthrow Mohammed Mossadegh. The Afghan jihad, that was like, almost 20 years war. It was from 70, well, less than 20 years, like 13-year war from like 79 to like 92, 93. And alongside the CIA, the MI6 actually supported the Mujahideen factions. We've talked about this before in the USSR. And that was because, they were trying to topple the Soviets. So those are the best documented ones. But you have to understand that divide and rule is a colonial method. So as a general British imperial practice, divide and rule aids them in managing communal divisions so that they can maintain control. Like, we're keeping the peace, it's all good. And it's a recognized strategy. And we saw it in British India too. That doesn't necessarily mean that London created every faction, but it exploited and exacerbated the cleavages. But I'm going to tell you this, the Muslim Brotherhood was indeed a manifestation of British intelligence. And, I'm asserting that as a fact. It may not, be something that people are happy with. I give zero fucks. That's the way it is. Now, the reason I say this is because, what people don't know is that the Center for Islamic Studies, right, was actually created by King Charles himself. It was, I'm trying to remember the year. The Center for Islamic Studies. He created it in Oxford and funded it, which is where the Muslim Brotherhood kind of took hold. Isn't that where Huma Abedin's parents kind of studied too? And I want you guys to be paying attention to what I'm telling you, right? So the British actually paid for this. Now, Britain actually occupied Egypt in 1882. And so the country had become like a colony of theirs. Their British advisors dominated the Egyptian government, the military, and their economy. Nationalist and religious, resentment actually was present for a long time. Now, in the 20s, the Egyptians were extremely frustrated with the foreign domination of the Suez Canal and the economy, which was the main goal as to why they migrated the Jews there in the first place. Why I'm telling you, like, even though they acted like animals when they went to a place that they were settling in, their objective when they migrated these settlers there was not to settle or create a state of Israel. It was to help the British take more control of the area and the Suez Canal. So I need people to understand that this is, how colonialism always worked. And this is how divide and conquer. And then if that doesn't work, slaughter them all and tell them to bend. How about that? Thank you for the coffee. So what's fascinating is that, a lot of people don't seem to understand that in the 20s, when all this shit was going down, they were like, oh, we're going to pause, bring it. We had foreign domination of the Suez Canal and economy. We had moral westernization promoted by colonial institutions. Maybe you should pray to God more. Maybe you should wear miniskirts, kind of like that. And then there was the collapse of the Ottoman Caliphate that was completed in 1924, which left a lot of Muslims worldwide searching for like some sort of political identity. Because that was a massive empire, the Ottoman Empire. Mecca was taken away from them and given to the Saudis. Because at that point, they didn't think the Saudis were anything. They're still swinging for trees. Fuck them with their kings and their gold. Like, nobody cares yet. We're going to get down there later. They underestimated people. But so that's what happened. I mean, if it's like America gets dissolved and they're like, America, you have no land. And then you're just like, all right, so like, what am I? Am I Canadian, Mexican? Like, what the fuck do I identify as? So we had a bunch of Muslims under the Ottoman rule that had nowhere to go. They had zero identity. They didn't know what the fuck was going on. And so it was in this environment of all this collapse that Hassan al-Banna came to be. And he formed the Society of the Muslim Brothers in March of 1928. Now I need you to kind of open up the history books and kind of think, what happened in March 1928 in America? Anyway, his goal was to restore Islamic values, unity, self-governance in response to Western colonialism and this moral decline in their eyes. And more so, it was more they were really miffed, about the Ottoman Empire, the way Erdogan is too. Because these are really hard things. Like, take the example that I said about Kansas and fake Uyghurs coming. Think about it. Like, this shit is really fucked up. So, the colonial conditions actually created the Muslim Brotherhood. All right? And, they generated the very environment of dislocation, secular elite rule, and resentment that made a movement like the Brotherhood very appealing to people. I mean, all of you would be joining militias like fucking crazy. If you thank you for the donation, all of you, like say you were the Kansas people and the settlers came and then they raped the lady across the street that was an old lady and took her fucking house, you'd be signing up with the militia and you would be blowing these Uyghurs out the water. And if there was some organized something saying, yeah, we need to get rid of them, it's them, we need to bring law and order back and make it Kansas again, you would fucking join it. And so this is how divide and conquer, right? This is how they do it. And all this time, right, people have had this idea of how things happen, but it's not true. I mean, after World War II, and especially during the Cold War era, British and American intelligence really used these Islamist actors to counterweight the secular Arab nationalism and communism. So when the Arabs were like, we want to be independent, they were like, all right, let's get some jihadists up. Here's some money. Go do some jihad. Go. When none of that is part of Islam. That's all manufactured. This is why I get mad when I see people, Islam can't coexist with us. Fuck you. That's a British talking point. Who are you subject of? The crown? I think we gained our independence. Hello? We have our own mind. Hello? So, you got to think about it. They manufactured that shit. They manufactured jihadis. They manufactured, and that's why Trump did such an exceptional job. He cut out every single globalist from the conversation, had Jared talk to them and say, all right, UAE, tell me what you need. What does your country want? Well, we want, no. I don't want to talk about the bad blood you have. Tell me what your country needs. Tell me what your needs. Well, we want to be able to be more independent. We're kind of dependent on this and that, and we've got too much investment from China, and the loans are really big. All right, okay, noted. Israel, what do you want? Oh, we just want, well, let's not even talk about Bibi, because he did not want the Abraham Accords. He did not, even though it created some form of deal and open channel of communication with Arab nations around, he didn't fucking want it. He's like, nope, the Balfour said we're taking all of it. We're going to take it all. And Trump is like, shut the fuck up, dude. Like, stop. He was the biggest problem. And that's why when he talked about the agreement that they made, he said he had no choice. Because he didn't. Enough is enough of bringing these old, strategies into 2025. This divide and conquer, right? That they've been doing. It's like death by 1,000 cuts for all nations by promoting things like this. And Trump put a stop to it completely. So this is what our president achieved. He actually achieved peace. Because Britain was the architect of the fucking table, right? World War I, World War II, British foreign policy became a brokerage system. And London wasn't the only enforcer, but it controlled access to legitimacy and credit. And so President Trump, disrupted this old brokerage model. He came in and flipped the entire fucking dynamic, and this is why they hate him. Instead of following the inherited global governance template, the multilateral conferences, the conditional aid, the moral appeals, he reframed the Middle East diplomacy as a series of self-contained transactions. Individualized deals, the U.S. negotiated directly with each nation. UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, Morocco, no collective Arab bloc, no intermediary structures, one-on-one. What do you want, Morocco? Talk to me. How can I help you? How can we help each other so we can bring peace here? My country wants to make money. You want to make money. Let's talk. Let's talk business. That is what the president did. Listening to any of the other, like Mark Levin and all these other fucking paid mouthpieces for the colonialist, imperialistic Zionist, fuck them. I'm telling you what happened. Economic sovereignty was the first thing he did. Replace the dependence on the IMF or aid channels with private investment, tech, and trade frameworks. How about that? Sounds good. No more IMF. No more Bird Lady Lagarde taking in, forcing more debt and making money off of our debt. I agree. He reduced mediation. Britain, the EU, and traditional NGOs were no part of the process. They were just observing, I guess, because they were nice. This reconfiguration removed London's traditional leverage points, the committees, the financing boards, the think tank networks, through which historically they exercised soft power. Our president is a fucking genius. And what he did was dismantle their ability to continue to exercise power over so many nations. And it's not just the British, right? The British started it. But like in the Abraham Accords in 2020, that represented more than normalization between, Israel and Arab states. It actually symbolized a move from imperial-style peace management to sovereign deal-making. And I direct you to listen carefully to his 2017 UN speech. My God, this guy, he's like, I don't know if I'll go to heaven. Man, you totally flipped that table, and I love that. Now, I want you guys to know that earlier peace processes like the Oslo, Camp David, Quarter Roadmap, all of that were operated through Western institutional sponsorship, the US and UK coordinating under UN oversight, right? That's what happened, right? Back then. But Trump's deals, they bypassed that apparatus completely. He's like, fuck that. We're going to talk commercial. Let's talk mutual investment, energy cooperation, arms sales, tourism. Let's go. Let's make this, guys. Gaza's a beach. Palestinians, you need money. You need infrastructure. You can't be an independent state if your GDP is like negative 1 million. Let's get going. We're going to invest. We're going to put buildings. We're going to give you jobs. We're going to train you. And then we'll talk about how we can do this. But for now, you're under the protection. No one's going to bomb you. No one's going to kick you the fuck out. Israel, stay in your fucking lane. And this actually sidelined Britain, the broader EU diplomatic cops, right, that prefer that slow consensus building via these multilateral instruments. So, basically what President Trump did was he didn't just redraw alliances. He rewrote who sits at the fucking negotiating table. That's basically what he did. And the consequences here is that there's a decline in crown-style influence. And crown influence doesn't mean monarchy itself per se, even though we are speaking of a monarchy, but it's the British tradition of imperial stewardship, kind of like what the Romans did too, guiding, mediating, and managing regional order through soft institutional control. So I take you, before I close today, I take you back to my show yesterday, where I kind of outed the fact that USAID had provided a grant of a lot of money to Miss Chenoweth at Harvard to see how LGBTQ plus can be involved in nonviolent resistance. Tell me how many LGBTQ plus have we seen committing atrocities? That, my friends, is soft institutional power. This is why those 3 names that I named yesterday should be held accountable for it. Okay? So that ends tonight's show. I ran over about 10 minutes. I'm really glad to be back on YouTube. I'll just be using original music. I wanted to tell you guys, I'm thinking, obviously I talk news and politics and history and religion, kind of like to guide you through all of this kerfuffle that's going around globally. But I actually thought that my TikTok could be like just me, not politics, not talking about anything like that, but just me. I think that's a pretty cool thing to do. So I know a lot of heads will explode. How can they take you seriously? Because I'm actually one of the smartest people in the world. How about that? Sounds kind of cocky what I said, but it's true nonetheless. So tomorrow I will probably have a rerun show if I don't do one early in the morning because I have shit to attend to tomorrow. We have a legal call. I've got a ton going on. So definitely Friday no show because I have to go do something. So I will be unavailable on Friday. So, and it's personal stuff. So that I don't want to talk about publicly. So on that note, I'm glad to be back on YouTube. You will be seeing me more frequently. Obviously, I need to settle on times, but I'm waiting for schedules of my niece because I'm a mom again to my 16-year-old niece. So It's not like I can have a set schedule because she'll forget her lunch or demands that I drive her to all these soccer and basketball things. So I will try to get her schedule in order so I can have a more sustainable schedule. But, on TikTok, like, I'll be on there whenever, just running my mouth as a woman, just talking girly shit or showing off like handbags or what I like or like this $3 lip gloss I got that I love, stuff like that. Just lifestyle stuff. I think it actually helps me process more than anything, so you don't have to watch me. But I know my haters love watching me, so you guys can come and hate. So thank you very much for joining me today. I'm going to give you guys another original song, which is actually quite fitting. And the reason is, the biggest problem that we have is these influence networks that are the way imperialistic, I guess imperialism hasn't died yet. And, well, it's on its deathbed right now, thanks to what President Trump accomplished. So when you hear people saying, oh, it's this, oh, it's that, I'm telling you what happened. He bypassed all of them. He said, I don't care. I'm talking to them one-on-one. And then Jared Kushner sat down and had a 20-point thing. And the Arabs said, we need to have a Palestinian state. That was wrong. They fucked it up. They created all these factions. They funded this shit. You guys did it, America. And Trump is like, I'm sorry for what the previous administration did. You can't hold us responsible. We're moving forward. Let's move forward. How can we move forward? And this is what happened. So, when some people are like, oh, it just says that it's like, how can you build a state when they don't even have actual borders because they've been annihilated? He is adding value to these people. And unfortunately, we have so many operations right now being deployed that it's about to go down hardcore. And we'll talk about that, especially come Monday. Peace out. God bless.
For justice and truth, yet behind closed doors they're aloof, promising change but staying the same, playing the people like pawns in a game. Their voices loud, their actions weak, in the shadows their true motives speak. They rise on the backs of those they betray, while the real issues are kept at bay. They amplify the voices they choose, silencing those they want to lose. They jeer at your stumbles, revel in your plight. Their words cut deep like blades in the night. Concealed behind screens, their joy is clear. Thriving on pain, they draw near. They don't see the people's disdain, yet the people also play the same game. It's why their followers slowly drift away in so much pain. Entitled, delusional, self-serving, oh their pride. While people suffer, they walk and laugh and take it all within their stride. Yet they are worshipped and rewarded. The imbalance is oh so clear. The real problem's right here. In the grassroots, the same old game. Influencers and leaders all the same. Social media's playground, a mirror to see the political stage hypocrisy. Call it out and you're their foe, but the truth is something we all know. Who stands by their side, knowing this? They are held to the same standard as an abyss. You hold the key, they promise change, they promise hope, but in their lies we cannot cope. The same old faces, the same old game, in the end it's all the same. They rise to fame on broken dreams, ignoring all the silent screams. Their power grows, their influence spreads, while truth and justice hang by threads. Entitled, delusional, self-serving, oh their pride. While people suffer, they walk and laugh and take it all within their stride. Yet they are worshipped and rewarded. The imbalance is oh so clear. The real problem's right here. Eyes wide open, we see through the veil. The irony of influence, a tale to tell. In every group, the same old song. The power imbalance, it won't be long. Behind the screens, they hide their face. In shadows, they control the space. Their words are weapons, their smiles deceive. In their world, it's hard to believe. They claim to fight for you and me, but in their hearts, they're far from free. Their actions speak, their motives clear. Their words just ear candy for your ear. The real problem's always near. See the truth in every action, in every move. The irony of influence plain to see. A call for change for you and me. Behind the screens, they hide their face. In shadows, they control the space. Their words are weapons, their smiles deceive. In their world, it's hard to believe. The real problem's always near. So let's question more and see the truth in every action, in every move. The irony of influence plain to see. A call for change for you and me. Those eyes.